unpack this. We're diving into a specific moment in time, a community facing, well, some incredibly difficult challenges. We're talking intense violence, drug activity.
Yeah.
But it's also a place where, according to the source we're looking at today, a really unique approach to tackling crime achieved something pretty remarkable. The Attorney General back then called it real success.
That's right. Our source for this deep dive is a 2007 article, SF Gate Chronicle, and it really details this anti-crime effort in East Palo Alto. It gives us a fascinating snapshot, really, of how a community and government tried to respond to a crisis.
And our mission here, what we want to do, is really pull apart that approach.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just, one thing. It was a mix. We want to look at what the article reported about the results, say, after 9 months or so, understand how these different pieces fit together.
Yeah, the mechanics of it.
Exactly. And maybe explore why, at that time anyway, people were looking at it as maybe a model for other places dealing with similar stuff. It's kind of a story of innovation, collaboration, when things were really tough.
Definitely. A lot to unpack there.
So maybe first, to really get the impact of this whole effort, we need to paint a picture of what East Palo Alto was like before it all kicked off. How did the article describe things?
Well, the article sets the scene pretty clearly. East Palo Alto was struggling significantly. Lots of drug strife, gang strife. It wasn't minor stuff.
Right.
The violence was pervasive and, deeply concerning for the people living there.
And the article mentions a specific trigger, right? A spate of violence starting in late 2006. Does it give numbers? Like, how bad was that period?
It does, and they're pretty stark. The article notes that in just 3 months, November 06 through January 07, 6 people were killed.
Wow.
And 67 others were wounded in shootings. Just think about that concentration of gun violence in such a short time. It's a clear sign things were at a crisis point.
Absolutely. 67 wounded, 6 killed in 3 months. Okay. So, facing that, what was the official response? The article mentions the police chief.
Yeah, Police Chief Ronald Davis. He declared a crime emergency, and he formally requested help from the state attorney general's office. That's a big step.
It sounds like it.
It really was. And that call for help, that's what kicked off what the article calls a comprehensive approach. And the key word there is comprehensive. It wasn't just more cops on the street.
Right.
It was, according to the source, really blending different elements into one strategy, multifaceted.
Okay, let's break down those pieces then. First, there was a strong law enforcement component. How did the article describe that part of it?
It was definitely collaborative. You had undercover agents from the State Department of Justice working right alongside the local East Palo Alto police. And interestingly, officers brought in from neighboring cities, too.
So a coordinated effort.
Very much so. And their focus was a direct crackdown on the drug and gang activity that was seen as, fueling the violence.
And the article gives specifics, right? Metrics for what that enforcement push achieved over those 9 months. What numbers did it mention?
Yeah, it does. The crackdown led to over 225 arrests, more than 400 parole or probation searches, and they seized 44 guns off the street.
44 guns. Significant.
And drugs, too. Big amounts. 2 pounds of crystal meth, nearly 1,000 grams of cocaine, 942 grams, and 133 grams of heroin. So yeah, on the enforcement side, definite measurable actions and results.
Right, so that's one big piece, enforcement. But the article really emphasizes this wasn't just top-down pressure. There was a powerful community component. How did that look on the ground, according to the source?
This was critical, kind of the bottom-up part of the strategy. It involved really intense community activism and what the article calls street-level diplomacy.
Street-level diplomacy, interesting term.
Yeah. Community groups weren't just waiting for things to happen. They were out there actively promoting nonviolence.
Like that march, the Live in Peace March.
Exactly. The article highlights that march in February, organized by a group called One East Palo Alto, drew hundreds of people out onto the streets.
So visibility, but more too.
Oh, yeah. Beyond just marches, groups were coordinating practical help. Things like employment programs, mentoring programs, real support systems.
And the article quotes some community leaders. Their perspective seems really important here, driving home that citizen involvement.
Yeah.
What did they say?
Thea McNair-Knox from that group One East Palo Alto, she noted that you could feel personal investment growing in the community. People were stepping up, and the violence was actually receding. You could see it.
Okay.
And then there's Douglas Fort for Youth by Youth. He had a really powerful, kind of blunt take. He basically said, enforcement alone, not enough.
Right.
He's quoted saying, success, ultimately, falls back to the citizens until mama that owns that house says no to that kid that's selling dope in front of her house.
Well, That's vivid. It really paints a picture of needing that local ownership, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It underlines the article's point. You need roots in the community for change to stick.
So we have enforcement, community action, and then there was this third element, maybe less common, mediation and diplomacy. How did the article describe that working?
Yeah, this was pretty unique. It involved key figures in the community like religious leaders, pastors,
Okay.
and even, get this, reformed veterans of street violence themselves, people who had been there. They stepped into that really difficult space to try and broker truces between feuding groups.
That takes incredible courage. And the article has that one detail about those efforts.
Yeah.
Really striking.
It really is. The source notes that these meetings, these discussions, were often super tense. Sometimes they even had to hold them on neutral ground, like in other cities, just for safety.
Makes sense.
But sometimes, the article says, these meetings actually ended in hugs
Yeah.
between people who were, previously bitter enemies.
Bugs, it's quite something. It really humanizes how hard that work must have been, that relationship building at the street level.
Absolutely. It shows the depth of the effort beyond just arrests or programs. It was about changing relationships, too.
Okay, so you've got this blend. Integrated state and local enforcement, proactive community mobilization, these support programs, and these really brave, difficult mediation efforts. After about 9 months of this multi-pronged approach, what did the SF Gate Chronicle article report? What were the results?
Well, the Attorney General at the time, Jerry Brown, his assessment was pretty positive. He called the whole drive a real success.
Real success. Okay.
And he felt they'd made a definite dent in this crime wave, as he put it.
Definite dent. Do the numbers in the article back that up?
Yeah.
Especially compared to that awful 3-month period before? What about shootings?
It's a really dramatic shift reported in the article. In the 9 months after the state and city partnership began, 1 person was killed and 51 people were wounded by gunfire.
Okay, 1 killed, 51 wounded over 9 months. Compare that again to before.
Remember, the 3 months before it kicked off, 6 killed, 67 wounded. So, going from 6 fatalities to 1 over a period 3 times as long, and fewer injuries despite the longer time frame. That points to a significant impact on the gun violence, according to the article's figures.
Yeah, those numbers they're pretty compelling.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just shootings, was it? Did other crime rates change?
That's right. The article also mentioned drops in other key areas. Robberies were reported down 60% compared to the previous year.
60%.
60. And auto thefts were down 30%. These aren't small changes. They suggest a substantial shift in community safety based on the report.
Okay, so real success, definite dent, significant drops in crime stats. But the article also mentions Brown added a note of caution.
Yes, exactly. Despite the clear success, he wasn't declaring mission accomplished. He stressed the need to maintain real vigilance.
Keep the pressure on, basically.
Yeah. Success was achieved, but the work wasn't seen as over. And interestingly, from the community side, Faye McNair Knox, her perspective kind of echoed that positive shift, but also looked forward. She said East Palo Alto was becoming the place where people look and say, how did they do it?
Right, which leads perfectly into this idea that maybe this approach, this unique blend, could be a blueprint for others. The article talks about that possibility, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Attorney General Brown actually stated publicly he was willing to try and replicate this effort in other cities facing similar violence problems.
Did he say how?
He mentioned having developed certain technologies and a pattern of experience from the East Palo Alto work. He seemed confident they'd learned things that could be applied elsewhere.
And he specifically offered help to places like Oakland or Richmond if they asked.
Yes, the quote was something like, he'd be there if they called. The article actually did a bit of follow-up on that. It noted that in Oakland, the chief of staff for Mayor Ron Dellums confirmed they were having discussions with Brown's office about public safety partnerships. So, talks were happening, but he was waiting for more information about what resources would actually be available. Money, personnel.
The practicalities. And Richmond.
Richmond's mayor at the time, the article says, couldn't be reached for comment, so unclear there.
So the willingness from the state was there, at least stated, but actual replication seemed to depend on other cities actively asking and figuring out the resources.
Pretty much. And the article also includes a perspective from another police chief, Susan Mannheimer from San Mateo. She weighed in on what she thought was critical for making something like this work elsewhere.
What does she highlight?
2 main things. Strong community backing. Absolutely essential.
which mirrors the East Palo Alto experience.
Exactly. And effective police coordination between different jurisdictions, regional cooperation.
Which also mirrors the East Palo Alto approach, with state, local, and neighboring cities involved.
Right. So her points really reinforce the core elements described in the East Palo Alto case itself. It wasn't just one magic bullet.
So let's sort of wrap our heads around this deep dive into the 2007 article. What's the bottom line here? It presents this case study, right? A community, East Palo Alto, facing severe violence. They implement this strategy, blending state law enforcement, deep local community action, grassroots mediation, and according to the article, achieves measurable, really significant success in cutting down violent crime.
Yeah, it presents a really compelling example, I think. How a complex problem maybe requires a complex kind of layered solution. You combine the official power and resources from the state
Right.
with the power of the citizens themselves and that really difficult, delicate work of reconciliation and diplomacy on the streets.
And the article leaves us with this thought, right?
Right.
The Attorney General was apparently willing to share this model. Community leaders felt it could be an example. But as we saw, actually doing it elsewhere depended on other cities calling, on resources being available. Though, given the real success the article documents,